All right, everyone. Good morning, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm Katie Erickson. I'm the Marketing Director for Boyer and Associates. I've just got a couple quick housekeeping tips for you before we get started with our presentation. First of all, wanted to let you know that we are recording this webinar, so you will get a copy of it. Likely that will be around tomorrow morning. It comes directly from GoToWebinar. Second, you are all muted because we've got quite a few people on our call today, which is awesome. But if you do have any questions, you'll notice in your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little question pane there. You can go ahead and type your questions in there, and then we will get to as many of those at the end as we are able. And then third, just wanted you to know we will have a quick, just 3 questions survey at the end. It'll pop up at the end of the webinar. If you can answer that, it just kind of gives us a feel for, do you want us to follow up with you? Are you just here for learning? Just so that we know what you actually want from us as far as follow-up. And then I do have 2 others on our call with me today. First of all, we have Tom Hart. He is one of our pre-sales solution engineers, and he's going to be your presenter today. He's got some great use case scenarios for nonprofits in Power BI all ready for you. And then we also have John Hill with us today. He is a solution architect for Power BI and will kind of be helping us field some of those questions as they come in. And I do believe that is actually all I have. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it to you, Tom. We are excited for your presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Katie. And thank you everyone for joining today. Like Katie mentioned, I'm a pre-sales solution engineer, and I'm excited for this conversation because about 10 years ago, I was an intern at Open Arms of Minnesota, which is a great nonprofit in Minneapolis. And I was amazed by their focus then on data. And I had a very patient volunteer who worked with me when I was interning to make sure that I didn't accidentally delete records in their volunteer database, because Open Arms has a lot of volunteer data. And so all the way since then, it started to get in my mind how important data and reporting is in the nonprofit world. So a great kind of inspiration for some of our conversation today that has stayed with me over the years here. So the agenda for today is we're going to look at what is Power BI, why Power BI in general, and then for nonprofits specifically. And then we have a demo of the Program Impact Dashboard, which is some pre-built functionality, part of Microsoft Cloud for Nonprofit, which we'll talk a little more about, and show how you can drill into funding and program impact with that dashboard. And then a more general core features demo to look at how with Power BI, you can connect to data sources, create reports and share, and accelerate that movement from insights to action through the use of data-driven decision-making. So like Katie mentioned, we'll have time at the end for questions, and we look forward to having that conversation with you all. So let's jump into what is Power BI. Power BI is many things, and it is several elements that work together. So typically you'll just hear people refer to Power BI, but they could be referring to Power BI Desktop, which is the free desktop application typically used for report designers, admins, and developers. And so that is an authoring environment where you connect to data sources and create visuals, and we'll be showing some of that functionality today. So from the Power BI desktop environment, typically you then publish reports into the Power BI service, which is in the browser. So Chrome, Safari, Edge, and the Power BI service is typically used for sharing and interacting with those reports and dashboards that have either been created by yourself or other people in your organization or other stakeholders that you are working with. And then as this visual kind of on the screen here shows, we can also display reports in Power BI Mobile. so iOS, Android, and Windows mobile devices. We won't be showing that specifically today, but there are examples available that you can download and try out and get a feel for that utility of interacting with reports and data visualizations in a mobile environment. And then lastly, there's Power BI Embedded. And Power BI Embedded is a great way to white label or utilize some of the great features and functionality from Power BI within your own website or within your own web application or app. And Power BI Embedded allows you to deliver the reporting and data visualization and analytics functionality from Power BI within your own context. So this is not something that we're going to dive into much deeper today, but is very worth checking out if you have specific use cases for reporting and you want to embed those reports within an existing environment. So now that we've talked a little bit about what is Power BI, let's focus on why Power BI in general, and then we'll talk about why Power BI for nonprofits specifically. So if you're joining this webinar, you're probably familiar that Microsoft has a very large ecosystem, and Power BI is an important piece of that overall ecosystem, and it integrates very well from an analytics and business intelligence standpoint. So you'll see Power BI show up within Dynamics 365. So in the nonprofit world, that would typically be for fundraising and engagement or constituent marketing. And Power BI is very useful there to quickly visualize donor impact, volunteer metrics, and many other kind of nonprofit specific reporting needs. We'll also touch on in the demo today the way that Power BI is well integrated into Teams and Outlook, as well as other Microsoft products like Excel, and how you can easily export data from Power BI and work with it in Excel, or pull data from Excel, SQL, Azure, SharePoint, many Microsoft products into Power BI and report on and visualize that data there. So the strength of the integration is one major benefit of Power BI. And then as importantly is the ease of use. As the cliche, you want it to be powerful and simple kind of goes. Power BI manages to do both of those things at the same time, which is pretty rare. So you can get up and running with Power BI, as we'll see in today's demo, very quickly. And it scales to very complex use cases with multiple collaborators and enterprise level reporting needs. So that combination of ease of use and scalability is really a major benefit of Power BI, as well as the security, that you can create secure connections with data with hundreds of data connectors that Microsoft and Power BI have ready out of the box, as well as connecting to custom data sources in a very secure manner. And then once you've made those data connections, you also have security when you are distributing your reports. So there's very granular permissions on who can see what reports and how you can control dashboard level down to very granular permissions on that security. Also worthwhile to highlight that Power BI is innovative and reliable. As we're closing today, I'll show one industry data point that really drives that point home, that Power BI has been continuing to be innovative in the analytics and reporting space for a long time, and with very high levels of reliability. So as a cloud-based service for the Power BI service, you can be very confident that it will be available and reliable for your and your team's needs. Another big point for why Power BI is the cost effectiveness. At $3 per user per month for Power BI Pro, it can be a really cost-effective way for nonprofits to get a more data-driven insight into your organization. And then lastly, Power BI is actively being developed. So you may have heard announcements recently about Microsoft Fabric or Microsoft Copilot, and there's some really exciting things that Microsoft is doing to make a more end-to-end human-centered analytics platform with Microsoft Fabric, and to enable Microsoft Copilot to act as an assistant or a co-pilot in our various reporting workflows. And Power BI continues to be a central component of these evolutions, of these developments that Microsoft is making. So that active development means that what you're seeing today is getting better and more robust with time. And that's really exciting from a data storytelling standpoint. One more point on why Power BI is the active community. So just like it's important that the product and the platform is being actively developed, having a large number of individuals and organizations that are contributing to and working with Power BI makes it more beneficial for when you start using Power BI. You have inspiration in the form of the data stories gallery here, where you can go, and I'll show just one quick example. So this is a visual vocabulary that someone published to the data stories gallery. And this is a Power BI dashboard that you can interact with and see examples of different types of visuals. So let's say I want to see some examples of how to visualize correlation in my data. There's a nice page here for that, as well as the link to the report definition file. So you could download and copy and use what's relevant to you from this Power BI dashboard. So this is a good example of how having an active community around Power BI means that there are templates and examples that you can use as inspiration or your starting point. And there are forums and partners such as Boyar, where you can go to these forums and seek answers and work with partners when you have more complex reporting needs, or you're looking for some additional support in your Power BI journey. Now let's talk a little more specifically about why Power BI for nonprofits. So like I mentioned at the beginning, Power BI is part of the Microsoft Cloud for Nonprofit vision with pre-built functionality in the Program Impact Dashboard, which we'll look at momentarily here, as well as several templates that you can download, these report definition templates that then you can integrate or connect your data and start using those templates with much less work than if you had to develop those templates all by yourself. So this is part of Microsoft's industry-specific cloud, where they worked with a wide number of nonprofits to define a common data model and some common features and functionality that are beneficial to a very wide range of nonprofits. So this pre-built functionality can be a great way to accelerate your use of technology and really benefit from the data that your organization already has without needing to reinvent the wheel and do all of this in a proprietary or custom fashion. Along with that, Microsoft Cloud for Nonprofit vision is the ability to visualize data from multiple sources with Power BI. So you likely have Excel spreadsheets full of data, potentially donor data within Blackbaud or Dynamics, and you want to integrate that data together. And in order to have a more holistic and comprehensive understanding of the funding and program impact within your organization, that integration of multiple data sources is very important. And Power BI, like I mentioned, makes that much more intuitive and easy to do than previous analytics and business intelligence offerings did. So all of that comes together, and the takeaway for your organization is moving from insight to action and accelerating program outcomes. So with that, let's go ahead and look at the program impact dashboard. So like I mentioned, this is a pre-built dashboard, and the primary benefit here is that it helps you understand the impact of funds raised, programs delivered, and outcomes achieved. So with this dashboard, we're going to look at the different tabs that it has already and how you can use it to streamline the preparation of reports by, say, screenshotting one of the tabs and including that in a stakeholder email or presentation, how you can compare metrics across all programs and track performance over time, and track progress to key program objectives and results. And in that workflow, break down silos between your fundraising and program priorities. So let's go ahead and jump into the browser here. And you can see I'm using the Edge browser. This works in whatever browser you prefer to use. And I'm looking at a program impact dashboard. This is all just demo data, but it helps give us a sense of the functionality here. So this first tab is impact delivered. And this is a nice high-level holistic overview of total revenue raised, total programs delivered, and total program participants served, with a listing of programs down here in the table. Like with most Power BI reports and dashboards, when I interact with, say, this education bar, you can now see I clicked education here, and the programs delivered education bar is highlighted, program participants served bar is highlighted, and the table filtered down to just be programs that have the objective of education. I can select that bar again, and it goes back to the overall view. So this can be very helpful when presenting or when you're working with data for your own kind of research purposes to see how you can interact and drill down into the programs and funding for your organization. This is more of a directly interactive control by selecting the visual in this way. Or in the left side here, you can also use these filters and facets to choose maybe global scope for programs or the program start date as well. The next tab in the program impact dashboard is program summary. And you'll see we're going a little more granular. So rather than looking at the overall organization, program level, and fundraising from the impact delivered tab, now we're looking more specifically at programs. And this is a great view for staff to slice and dice and dive into metrics for top 5, 10, 15 budgets, number of donors, and number of program participants served. As well, along the top here, we have number of programs by start date. And this is an example of a helpful aggregate visual where you'll notice we tend to have a lot of programs starting in January. And maybe there is a correlation between when our programs start and typical donation patterns. So we could draw some insights that maybe we want to try and stagger our start dates if we are trying to smooth out some of our donation cycle, or draw other insights from when our programs are starting. Again, we have interactivity here, so I can select the items in the top visual, and the other cards react based on that selection. So we can see which programs started in January of 2021 here, and filter down to that view. In our next tab, we have program monitoring. So this dashboard view provides program staff with a snapshot over time of how much a program, how much revenue has been raised by the program per calendar year, and compare it to the last year over the same period, and the number of program participants over time. This is a common request in the nonprofit world to be able to visualize this type of fundraising and impact data over time. And like I mentioned before, you could take a screenshot of one of these reports and easily share it out in email or in a presentation. And the last tab to highlight here is program impact. So this is a great view to look at a program and see its specific objective, budget, total revenue raised, and a results table. So we can go to another water availability program here and see top level objective, a budget, total revenue raised, and then scroll through the results table. Again, with all of the complexity in the nonprofit world, having a program impact summary view like this can be very helpful for internal and external communication. So with that look at the program impact dashboard, just reiterating, the big benefit here is that when you use this pre-built dashboard and connect it to Dynamics, is the kind of natural data connection here. So you might be using Dynamics for fundraising and engagement. Then the benefit that you derive is understanding the impact of funds raised, programs delivered, and outcomes achieved. Now let's take a look at a specific example of how you can get started with Power BI and work with some of the core functionality to accelerate mission outcomes. We're going to walk through 5 features, 5 of the most kind of core features in a Power BI report creation workflow. We're going to start by connecting Power BI to a data source, configuring dataset column visibility to select which columns from that data source will be in our report. Then we're going to quickly create a report and then publish that report from Power BI Desktop to the Power BI service in the browser and set permissions so that we can share the report via email, Teams, and more. So with that, we are going to jump now into Power BI Desktop. If you haven't interacted with Power BI Desktop before, when you first open it up, you've got several options here to add data to your report. So we will, for today, be looking at some sample data from Excel, but let's just take a quick look at the number of other data sources that you can utilize as well. So like I mentioned, there are a lot of natural or pre-built connectors into all of the Microsoft ecosystem. So SQL Server, different Azure Web Services, SharePoint, Exchange, LinkedIn, as well as connectors built for Zendesk and Amazon Web Services and Salesforce. So scrolling through here, you can see many connectors already built that you can select, enter your credentials or environment data for that connector, and then be pulling in data from that data source into Power BI. Important to highlight here as well, that ability to bring in data from multiple sources and look at an aggregate or integrated view of that data. For today, let's go ahead and bring in a common data source, which is importing data from Excel. So I just have some nonprofit sample data that I'm going to bring in. And in a real use case here, the benefit of this sample data would be to try and compare volunteer and fundraising patterns. So you can see I selected an Excel spreadsheet. It's now giving me a preview of what is in that spreadsheet. So you can see just a quick, some sample data here. And fun side note, an AI use is if you need to generate some sample data for your own learning with Power BI, you can use ChatGPT or Bing or another large language model to ask it to generate a table of data and just tell it the columns and type of data you're looking for. And that is where this sample data came from. So in Power BI now, we have this preview of the data that we're pulling in, and I'm going to select transform data. So like you saw in our outline, we're moving from connecting to Power BI to a data source to now configuring dataset column visibility. So Power BI has pulled up Power Query Editor. There we go, got both of them up at the same time here. And Power Query Editor will look familiar to many of you as an Excel type interface, but with much more robust query functionality. So for today, I want to choose which columns to include in our report authoring environment and which ones to exclude. Let's say that I don't want to pull in personally identifiable information or PII. So I'm going to select the name, email, and phone columns. And from my command bar at the top here, select remove columns. You'll see that the interface is giving me quick feedback that now those columns have been removed. And in the right sidebar here, I have an applied steps history. So I can see that those columns were removed. And if I wanted to kind of toggle back and forth in history, I can step backwards and forwards in my applied steps there. Now, this looks good for today's purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and select close and apply. Important to note here that there is a lot that you can do in Power Query, and this is an important step in the data report creation workflow to bring in data, refine it, or normalize it to the needs that you have for the report, and then start your visualization process from here. So I select close and apply. Now Power BI is actually loading that data into the reporting environment. And now in the right sidebar here, we can see that table. And you'll notice that the name, email, and phone columns have been removed as intended. So no PII accidentally available here in the reporting environment. Now for creating some reports, we're going to do just quick report creation today to give you a sense for what's possible. And like I mentioned, this is a tool that many people spend their career specializing in. So there is a lot of depth. And if you have particular questions, John and I in the Q&A section can dive into a little more detail. But at a high level here, let's go ahead and start by selecting a table from our visualizations options. You can see that I can drag it around, very interactive and responsive interface for this placeholder table. Now that I have my visual selected, I'm going to go ahead and populate it with all of the data that I brought in from my Excel spreadsheet. Looks like I want to make the width a little wider and shrink down the height. And I'm actually going to shrink down these columns. You can see how I, similar to Excel, can click and hold on the edge of the column and just drag that around to resize. So very intuitive interface and a big step forward from some analytics options in the past. So creating a table, very common for reporting needs. Now let's see about adding a Q&A feature. And this is one of the AI features within Power BI that's very exciting. So, and useful today. So we'll go ahead and select the canvas and add in QA here. I can also add QA from the visualizations bar over here as well. So with this QA feature, I have a natural language interface. So I can use my kind of plain English to ask questions about data. So let's say I want to know which donor ID have the volunteer role of tutor. And you'll see some autocomplete or suggested sentences here where the question and answer Q&A feature in Power BI is using its awareness of the data types or the fields that I have available to refine what I'm typing. So I'll go ahead and take this top answer, and it looks like donor ID 1, 5, and 9, 1, 5, and 9 have the type of volunteer role of tutor. So great, kind of a nice quick interaction there. Now let's say I want to explore something a little more detailed. I want to know the top volunteer role by average lifetime giving total. So it looks like I'm seeing tutor again, and that is 500 is the lifetime giving total there. So just kind of checking the work. So there we go, just had to select for results, and now it's giving me the average lifetime giving total, and still correct results, the top volunteer role by overall giving. It seems like we have some generous tutors involved with this sample organization. So this is a good example of how Microsoft and Power BI are making it more intuitive and natural to interact with complex data sets. And I can just think in English and type in my questions and have answers surfaced from this data. Now, today's data set is a simple sample, and this scales to more complex data sets as well. Now let's do one more and then convert that into a visual here. So we're going to do sum of volunteer hours by volunteer role. And you can see instead of just generating a number and short text response, it's actually giving me a data visual. And I can click on this little icon to turn this Q&A result into a visual in my report here. Now, this is helpful to go from just quick questions into a visual that I could share with other people to show the sum of volunteer hours by volunteer role in a more intuitive format. And rather than just telling people that our tutors are great volunteers and they commit a lot of time to our organization, they can really see this in a clear visual here. And then let's see, to bring this back to remove the filter. We'll come back to remove filter on our table here in a moment. All right, so for the next visual in our table here, there we go. Now we are seeing all of our donors listed out again. Let's go ahead and use that Q&A feature one more time. So I'll add it in from our visualizations options. And this time I'm going to look at lifetime giving total by donation frequency. I'm curious to see, let's do some of, there we go. So I'm curious to know, and what I'm kind of thinking through here is there a relationship between how often someone's donating and the size of their overall lifetime giving total? Now, again, this is presenting a stacked bar chart, but if I want to look at this in a different format, I'll go ahead and turn this Q&A result into a standard visual, and then I can just select a different visual over here to see this same data, same question converted into different formats. Now this tree map here is helpful for hierarchical part-to-whole relationships. So we're seeing that there are donors who donate on a quarterly basis are donating much more than donors on a monthly or one-time giving basis. And if I want to make that a little more clear, I can go over here into my visualizations options and actually add on data labels to see 4,000 versus 1,000 in that comparison between quarterly sum of lifetime giving total versus yearly sum of lifetime giving total. So those are a couple of quick report examples. And now let's go ahead and we'll actually leave the Q&A feature on here as well, so that when we publish it, if other users want to ask more questions of this report, they can interact with it through this feature here as well. So now that we have a couple of quick reports created, just summarizing, I was using the visualizations options here and then the data to author these report visuals on the main canvas here. And there are many other options, but for today, we're going to go ahead and publish and first save our report. So we'll say Power BI for Nonprofit Demo. And with that, Power BI is prompting me where in the Power BI service do I want to publish this report to. I'm going to go ahead and select my workspace. And now we are moving from Power BI Desktop up into the browser. And as soon as the publishing is complete here, it is giving me an option to open Power BI in the service. So now, just to orient ourselves to what we're looking at today, we have seen connecting Power BI to data sources all the way through to quick report creation. And now we're up in the Power BI service and we are setting permissions on the report here. So you'll see again, I'm back in a browser environment, and in the command bar along the top, I have a manage permissions option, which I can select and create links to allow people in my organization or people with existing access or specific people to access this report, as well as if I want to allow them to build content with the data associated with this report. So good examples here of the granularity of control that you have from a security and permission standpoint. So now I could enter in a particular name and choose to send that, copy a link and share it with Matt that way. Select mail, open it up in Outlook, send it to Matt there, or select Teams and log into my Teams environment and send it out to Matt right there in Teams. One other option, so you'll see just kind of quick modal here for Teams. One other team sharing option is to embed the reports and dashboards directly as a tab within a Teams channel. So I'm here in a demo Contoso nonprofit Teams account, and I'm looking at this reporting posts channel. And you'll see along the top here, we have the program impact dashboard, which I can interact with just like the ones that we were seeing in the browser. So select education and have the entire visual filter based on that selection. And this can be a great way to distribute reports on an ongoing basis and encourage your team to be continually checking in with these dashboards. So going back into the Power BI service here, we've set some permissions for sharing this report, and you'll see some similar options along the top here for chatting in Teams. Now you can also share the dashboard or report out by embedding it into SharePoint or a Power Pages website or portal, or publishing to the web in a public fashion as well. And then there's a developer playground option for more Power BI embedded use cases. A few more examples of Power BI working well with the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem is you can export the data to analyze in Excel, export to PowerPoint as an image or as live data, so people can interact in PowerPoint with the visuals, or as an image to PDF format. Lastly, for sharing purposes, you can create a subscription. And this is a really convenient way to enter, let's say, weekly status update, and I can send it to a group of people here, and then send it on a repeating weekly schedule on every Monday at 10 a.m. And this is a great way to automate the delivery of this information. So with that, jumping back to, now we've gone through connecting Power BI to data sources. I'm just highlighting some benefits here of what we've been looking at in the quick demo. So we're enabling more report authors by making it easier to connect to data sources and Power BI. And then configuring dataset column visibility, helping your team confidently work with data in compliance, so we're not accidentally exposing PII or other sensitive information. We looked at quick report creation and how that can enable self-service data exploration, either for a personal kind of research effort, or to quickly create reports that you can then publish to the Power BI service and make sure the right people are seeing the right data by managing those permissions, and then sharing out the reports via email, Teams, and more, and that's saving time on data distribution. So bringing this all together, keeping the focus on accelerating mission outcomes for your organization, and like I mentioned at the beginning, Microsoft continues to be a leader in this space. So for the 16th consecutive year, Gartner recognized Microsoft as a leader in the analytics and business intelligence platforms category. And this definitely continues to be a strong part of the Microsoft ecosystem and the interoperability of these different applications. So with that, thank you all for joining. We've got time now for questions, and you can learn more and explore more about Power BI at microsoft.com/nonprofit/Power BI, or connecting with us here at Boyer. And I'm happy to connect as well on LinkedIn and answer questions or direct to more resources from there. And like Katie mentioned, please answer the 3-question survey that we'll be sending out. It's a helpful way to know if and how we can follow up with you all more to help you continue on your journey with Power BI.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. That's a great presentation and gives everyone a really great overview on some of the use cases they can use with Power BI for their nonprofit. We do have a whole bunch of questions for you guys, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of get started. What I'll do is read these out loud, and then Tom and John, you guys can kind of chime in and answer them. If we don't get to your question today, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards, but I'll get through as many of these as I can. So the first question we have for you guys is, are there any free or discounted resources for nonprofits to get their team members certified in Power BI?
Yep. So through Microsoft Learn, there are opportunities to learn more about Power BI. And John, I guess feel free to correct me, but I believe there are certifications or trainings you can go through. The certifications may have a small fee. And then on this Microsoft.com link here, there's more information about the grants and discounts available in general to nonprofits for Power BI.
I don't disagree.
And then Tom, if you can go back to earlier in the presentation, you had a link. I'm missing which one this was, Hector. One of those first few links that you showed earlier on in the slideshow. If you can possibly go back and we can get that. They want to.
Might have been the, was it the community?
Probably, yes.
So yep, data stories gallery. I can drop the link into chat here as well, if that's helpful.
Yes, perfect. That would be awesome.
Cheers.
And then I've had a few people asking about the recording. Yes, so if you join a couple minutes late, yep, you are going to get a webinar recording. It usually comes directly from GoToWebinar, so it's not going to be from Boyer, just in case you're wondering what this weird email address is. It'll come directly from GoToWebinar, and usually it takes about 24 hours. So you should have it by noon tomorrow. If not, you can reach out directly to us and we'll make sure that we get a copy. I know sometimes it gets caught up in spam. And then we do have a couple people wondering if they can get the PowerPoint as well. Tom, what about that?
Yep, we can definitely maybe include that in the follow-up as a like PDF form.
Yes, so I know we can't send it automatically with that GoToWebinar webinar recording, but if you just kind of reply to that then and let us know that you would also like the PowerPoint, yes, we'll make sure that you get that too. And then a few other questions for you. Does Power BI allow prompts?
Does Power BI allow prompts? I imagine the question might be asking from like a generative AI standpoint. If that's the case, then there are Copilot features for Power BI that are in private preview right now. The timeline for when those become more generally available, I believe, is later this year or early next year. So as Copilot for Power BI rolls out, then there will be more ability to prompt and interact with it, similar to the Q&A functionality that we showed today, but more robust, so that you could have more of a prompt kind of back and forth for report creation as well.
Awesome. And then one of the questions related to that Q&A, oh, no, I lost it. Let me find it again. Where did it go? Oh, I lost that one. All right, we'll move on to our next one here, no worries. How would you export your dashboards to Excel?
So from this view here, we can export the data from the dashboard to analyze in Excel. I guess, John, I'll defer to you if you're familiar with how to actually move, if the question is how to move visuals into Excel. I'm not familiar with that workflow.
Right, and there are many ways to do it, and I hate saying that as the default answer, but just knowing Microsoft, there's many ways to do what you're trying to do. And I guess the question needs a little bit more definition, because are we referring to doing it within the Power BI desktop? Are we referring it from one of the apps on the Power BI service, or are we referring to the actual dashboard, which is a different component in the Power BI world? A dashboard and a report are distinct entities. They're not used interchangeably, shouldn't be used interchangeably. So there are many ways to do it, and Tom just showed you kind of the first one from the view he was looking at on the service, and that's going to kind of give you that pivot table view of your data, so that you can use the same data to recreate your own visualizations if you want. But one of the things that we want to keep in mind with Power BI is that it can be used with Excel, but I would say 85% of the time it would be used to replace Excel. You know, you're using Excel for maybe visualizations, but also for creating formulas and those kind of things. So in one sense, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take your data, your reports, your visuals out of a tool that you've already developed them in and then move them to another tool. There are ways that Excel and Power BI complement each other. But my first inclination would be, what's the purpose, right? Why would you be taking data that you've pulled into a visualization tool, done all your work with it, and then represent it again in another visualization tool? So just with that being said, that would be my first thought about thinking about it. But secondly, then, yes, it can be done, and they do complement each other very well.
Awesome, thanks, John. Here's another great question. Do I need to manage data every time I need to create a report? For example, would I be able to keep adding data to an Excel and automatically update the visualization? Do I have to import a new file every time I update?
So once that data connection has been made for many different types of connectors, you can typically select refresh. But John, if there's any nuance there for Excel, I'll let you kind of add that in.
No, not really. A data source is a data source, be it an Excel spreadsheet or, you know, an Amazon Web Services S3 bucket. The same concept applies if you are adding records to Amazon and you've got some sort of either manual or automated refresh going on. The data is going to be pulled from the data source and presented to your report. Same with it being an Excel spreadsheet. It's a data source that is, if it's constantly, or not constantly, if it's being updated, then Power BI will be able to either manually or automatically refresh that data. So no difference in the data sources as long as there's a connection to it.
Great. And here's a question for you on security. So when you're setting permissions and security, can you restrict objects or tabs to a selected group?
Sorry, I was answering an ADA question in the chat here. John, I'll let you take the first swing at that.
Okay. It's Microsoft, so once again, there's many different ways to do this. If we're just referring from a Power BI perspective, there is 2 levels of security. One's called an object level security, and one's called a row level security that we can apply to specific pieces of data. So with the data coming out of any of your data sources, you can apply security to it, which would be more on the row level security. So let's say you have territories that you are collecting your fundraising from, different territories, and you don't want the other fundraisers to be able to see other territories' funds. So you can limit that report to only show funds collected by territory for specific fundraisers. It's all one report, but you just have security applied to it. So that would be your row level security. And then you have other types of security where you can grant or deny access to specific reports that you publish up to the apps. So it's quite extensive in how either wide you want to cast your security net or how granular, like to specific pieces of data. Even let's say by GL codes. If you're looking at financial data, only certain groups of people can see, you know, your specific GL codes. So you can get very, very granular with how you implement security.
Awesome. Let's see. Tom, a quick question for you. Where exactly did you access that Q&A AI?
So you can access it from multiple places. Within where I was accessing it is we're in Power BI Desktop here. I went to Insert and then Q&A here, or within the visualizations pane, you can also select the Q&A visual.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to put a plug in for that Q&A because it's probably one of the least used features. And with Fabric and Copilot and AI coming out, it's just going to be really one of the probably should be most used features within Power BI, to just use a kind of natural language, asking a question of your data and having Power BI present you with a list of options or an option that you can then narrow down to get specifically what you're interested in. I think that's going to be a game changer.
Agreed, yeah.
I think we got time for a couple more here. Try to squeeze in a couple more. If you want to analyze SQL data, does it have to be on an Azure cloud server, or can it be from an on-premise environment?
It can be from on-premise as well. The connection to an Azure cloud server may be more straightforward, but as long as you've got the kind of exposed endpoint to access your SQL server, you can definitely report off of that there as well.
Awesome. And then question on, I guess, how much data can you use? Can you cache huge amounts of data in Power BI to avoid hitting the database again and again?
You can, yep. So there's a lot of different configuration options. There are some data model limits based on the license type that you have. So if you're getting into very large, I believe it's like 100 gigabyte data model type workload, then you're likely looking at a premium license. But for many workflows, you'll be kind of just fine with the data model limits as they are. And then yes, you can configure caching, different types of data connections to limit how often you're going back to that data source.
Awesome. We've got several more questions. We'll follow up with you guys afterwards. Just one last quick one, because I had mentioned it earlier and lost it. Now I found it again. They're wondering if the Q&A can also work in French. Curious.
Good question.
John, do you know
I just took a quick peek and I did not see anything that said it works in different languages, although I know Power BI has like 42 different languages that it supports. I didn't see specifically about Q&A being supported in a different language though.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's not there. I just didn't see it quickly today. So we could follow up with that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that's what we'll do with a few of these others. We do have a lot of more great questions, but I think we're out of time. So we'll go ahead and look through those later today or tomorrow and follow up with you as soon as we're able. Thank you guys so much for all the engagement. I love all these great questions, and the presentation was very well done. Thank you so much, Tom and John, for your assistance as well.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day.